Project 571, genetically engineered vampire created to destroy evil.
What do you want?
We need your help to kill a vampire.
Malleus Maleficario. It was written by a witch. The first witch. Titania.
That was a little snippet from The Witch's Hammer, the first film I ever solo directed, and it's just been remastered and re-released on Amazon. So if you like witches and vampires, then please do check it out. Anyway, let's get on with this week's episode.
We were out in LA for almost 15 years, doing various things as far as making all sorts of sketches, short films, music videos, features, and then eventually we started our own little production company called 418 Films. And yeah, we are on our fourth feature film since, I would say, probably in the last 5 or 6 years. So I think the first one came out in roughly fall of 2019. And yeah, we've always kind of been very indie, spirited, guerrilla, kind of do it yourself kind of filmmakers. And yeah, that's kind of where we're at. We have our fourth film hopefully coming out. We're waiting on festivals and that sort of thing. So depending on where it lands, summer, fall this year.
Right. Okay. So the first thing that you said there, which I looked at your IMDb, which interests me, is co-directing. Now, I've done that, didn't enjoy it, or at least kind of that had to end for me. But you're now on your fourth film. So tell me about what are the advantages of teaming up with someone to co-direct a film?
Well, I think the obvious advantages are, as anyone that's made anything knows, it's extremely difficult to make anything and you need as much support as possible. I also see the flip side of it too, where, it is, you're trying to have like a very personal, unique voice, singular voice, maybe. I'm sure everybody's been on sets where either a producer and a director are maybe arguing or two directors are arguing and all that. I mean, luckily for Kevin and I guess we just didn't know any better. We kind of started as a writing team. And we were writing a lot of stuff. We were kind of doing the more, I guess, traditional pitching to studios, pitching to networks, trying to get staffed, submitting samples, that kind of thing. And I think we're just lucky in the sense that we're like, besides being really good friends, we just have a lot of the same sensibilities. There never kind of seems to be like an ego. Like I think we both really just want the best, kind of out of the story, the film, the project, and we've kind of developed a way of working that I think works for us. A lot of people ask us like how it works. I don't know. I guess we don't know any better. And I think, I think my kind of, weaknesses are his strengths and vice versa. And we kind of complement each other well. So yeah, for us, it kind of works. We do everything like in-house. So I edit all the films and he scores it. He's an awesome musician. And yeah, I don't know. For us, it kind of works. We kind of have a shorthand. We've kind of over the years developed kind of like how we handle things on set. As far as, not that we ever argue, but like, who's kind of giving direction at any one time. We always kind of powwow, and then one of us is kind of that voice to either the crew or the actors, to kind of make sure there's like a singular kind of thing and they're not getting confused or anything like contradictory. Yeah,
that's sensible. It's good to have those conversations early and establish that relationship so you don't have those conflicts on set. And it's definitely worth doing that with all of your kind of heads of departments, but if you're co-directing, you've got to have it. So the film we're going to talk about is maybe 2 films back for you. I think it's called Cheat. Is that right?
Yeah. So it's actually one film back. Came out 2023 roughly.
Yeah.
And we premiered at Fright Fest in the UK.
Yeah. And so give me the pitch for the film. What's it about?
So it's basically it's a young college student who kind of comes on this like art scholarship to this small town, a little bit of a fish out of water story. And she's kind of put into house with a family, and that's kind of like some of these smaller towns kind of do this, where they pair a family with a college award recipient kind of thing. And basically the family that she's in has their own kind of grief and troubles. They had lost a daughter to suicide, or at least they think it's suicide, and the mother's kind of away in a rehabilitation center, and the dad's kind of trying to navigate really going on, and thinks that, kind of housing this, and doing something good for the community is helping, and kind of, does it replace this kind of maybe void or daughter presence in the house. And then, from there, basically, we kind of turned into a little bit of a psychological horror where, there's kind of a curse on this town, and it has the highest suicide rate in the nation, and everybody assumes it's suicide, and you learn to find out that it's actually kind of haunted by this spirit that is targeting infidelity and people that are cheating on their significant others. And and it kind of, we kind of drew some stuff from, we were looking at The Ring, It Follows, some of that kind of vibe, small town curse.
Cool. And how much did you spend on it? What was the budget for it?
So the production budget was $65,000.
65,000. And before we move on to numbers, so Fright Fest, obviously a lot of filmmakers, that's a big goal for them to get into Fright Fest. What impact did premiering Fright Fest have on the film, do you think, on both, I guess, reviews, perception, and sales, and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely is well known in the world, especially the genre world. So definitely people take notice of it and take notice of the name. So definitely like press, reviews. Also, it holds weight like when reaching out to people. So if you were, we would reach out to sales agents, distributors, even production companies and agents to a certain degree. And most people know Fright Fest and know of it. So it does give you kind of like an immediate kind of validity to them. They kind of do hold it in high regard. So it does, I guess, for lack of a better term, kind of cut through the noise. If you could introduce it and say, hey, we premiered at Fright Fest, or we were at Fright Fest, people will give it a look, for sure. I guess that definitely, along with some other festivals, some smaller international ones, does hold, some weight. It does seem like, at least now, that people, want to be pitched to, and those things help. If that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know if I could put like a direct correlation, because it's not a market, Fright Fest. So, Cannes or Toronto, or these ones that like have a market that it's kind of like you could maybe correlate a direct sale out of that. It wasn't quite that, but it definitely gave a lot of attention and kind of eyes on the film.
Yeah. I think there's I'm kind of a bit at odds with festivals at the moment. Just making sure, I don't always say to people, obviously film festival strategy, make sure you enter the right ones. And yeah, there are big ones. I think the good thing about Fright Fest is it's still in that list of big ones that people recognize, but it doesn't necessarily cost a fortune to enter, or is difficult not as difficult to get into, but you're maybe not competing with quite so many people because it's a genre, so you're kind of specific to that. So it is a good one. So $65,000 kind of horror thriller feature film. So then what happened? Sales and distribution. What happened next?
So basically we did, I guess we went the more, you could call it, traditional route. So had a sales agent, and tried to basically go around and get MGs. So US, international, collect MGs, and, hopefully that was potentially a starting point, or maybe even that would either recoup or kind of go past our budget. And I should mention, because it's kind of relevant, we had done that with a much smaller film before that. So we made a film called The Long Dark Trail, which was kind of like, everybody, I feel like, now kind of has their COVID movie that they made during COVID. Yeah. So that was kind of like our go into the woods, me, Kevin, and a camera. We're just stir crazy, and we want to make something with no kind of expectations. And after that, we made that very cheap. I mean, that was just one of those that it was like our own money, and it was like, maybe $10,000 or $15,000. And we did kind of get these smaller MGs, and they kind of added up, and we, you know, eventually made a little bit of money on it. So we're like, okay, maybe we could scale that up. You know, that was the idea with Cheat. So so that's what we did. We played, obviously, Fright Fest, so we played a bigger festival, so we kind of had high expectations, and we didn't quite get there. So whether that was the market, the film, you know, a combination of everything. So we sold a couple smaller kind of territories, and then eventually kind of mutually agreed to split ways with our sales agent, and then put it on Filmhub and kind of re-release it in some way, you know, to the public, and see kind of what we were able to do that avenue and on our own.
So that sales agent, had you, because of those sales you'd made, had all of that money gone straight into their marketing fees and all that malarkey?
For Cheat, or for the previous
one? For Cheat, let's say Cheat. Yeah.
So I mean, yes, we did. We put it back in for like marketing and stuff. So so those small ones for Cheat we put in, and then the one previous we kind of rolled into the Cheat budget, if that makes sense. From the film before.
I guess what I'm getting at is you hand it over to a sales agent, but they may have made some money out of it, but you haven't. Is that the situation?
Well, as far as the 65,000, we haven't been whole on that. And you know, and we'll talk. You know, we can talk more about it, but basically, I want to say, you know, Fright Fest, then we were probably with them, let's call it about a year before we kind of said, okay, maybe this isn't working. Let's, you know, kind of go, and then another year. So you're talking, you know, 2 years maybe after the premiere that we kind of re-released it. So I think that maybe also plays into it a little bit as far as numbers and stuff.
And it's interesting you've left that relationship. So when you left, because a lot of people they get into these contracts with sales agents, and potentially it might be difficult to get out of it. It sounds like it wasn't an acrimonious split. Was it just kind of like everyone's happy, or did you have to sort of go, no, I'm out?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I could say everybody was happy, but we, you know, we pleasantly persistent, I would say. You know, we were kind of like, look, you know, like we both had expectations for this. You had expectations, we had expectations. They clearly weren't met. You know, obviously we could agree to disagree, you know, and to their credit, they let us out. So, you know, some people wouldn't, some people might hold you to that and just, you know, say, screw you. So I do appreciate them doing that. And, you know, I just, at that time too, felt like there was this shift, from other filmmakers also saying that these deals were just the offers were getting worse and worse. So we kind of, you know, we're like, we want to try, and we think we can maybe do it better this way. That's kind of how it came.
Absolutely. So then, so now we're on to Filmhub. So how has that been for you, your overall experience? And can you give me some kind of top line amounts of how you've done?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll say that there's a lot of good at Filmhub, you know. There's no perfect in any of this, you know, and I think just for like what filmmakers are trying to get out of Filmhub and just distribution in general is like, you know, just some transparency and some kind of fair kind of splits formula, you know, plan going forward, that there is like some kind of light at the end of the tunnel that you can maybe recoup. They can kind of make this work, you know. And honestly, you know, our experience was pretty positive with Filmhub. I mean, when we first launched it, we paid for the premium tier, which is basically, you know, we wanted to have a little bit more control of when, you know, the release date is. Also, we had, you know, some smaller MGs for international territories, so we did need to block certain regions. So it does give you a little bit more flexibility. They do give you a rep that's very accessible, and never had any issues scheduling, talking to somebody or anything like that. QC was fairly easy. We got different subtitles, so all of that for the paid thing was good, was positive. The numbers of that, to keep that going, I think that's like kind of in a way to be seen, So we did that for a year, kind of launched it. I think that's the minimum that that they require you to at least have that paid tier for at least a year. And then we kind of went back to the free kind of core plan, just simply because it looked like for us that to keep paying that versus our returns didn't make sense, So yeah, I mean, I could give you some like rough numbers. I mean, I could say in about a year, we're probably in the like roughly $15,000 range as far as what we received back. Kind of Tubi and Amazon were some of our best kind of returns as far as channels that we got. And it seems like, and it's not a bad thing, but it seems like it's a numbers game. I think the more I'm kind of thinking about this, it's like maybe owning your own catalog, having a lot of films kind of going at once. And then if you go back to kind of like some of the sales deals or distribution deals, I'm always kind of like, what are they doing that we can't do ourselves, right? And now, I don't know how, other filmmakers feel, but it seems like there's very little MGs. It's mostly straight to digital with some form of a split. So, if there's nothing up front, it's like, well, if they want a 10-year deal and they're not, they're going right to digital and we're splitting with them plus whatever deals they have. So I'm like doing the numbers and I'm like, it doesn't quite make sense. So if they're playing the long game, they want a 10, 12-year contract. Maybe that's kind of the new thing is like, if you have a lot of films, if you have a catalog, and then, maybe it does take 10 years to make it back. Maybe it is a kind of the long play. So yeah, I mean, just like even using those numbers now, again, not a real kind of traditional big rollout with this because it was a year late kind of thing. But, 15 grand, is that going to stay? Is that going to drop off? Over 10 years, 8 years, you're kind of maybe getting it back. So that's kind of our experience.
And when you look at your earnings, is it, is the highest amount on launch and then it's slowly kind of flattened out?
I mean, there's definitely like those initial like first 2 to 3 months, for sure. But I got to tell you, it's pretty sporadic. Now we do run ads. And we've tried to kind of, monitor like spend versus return. And we do them consistently monthly.
Where do you do your ads? On Facebook?
Mostly Meta. So we do Meta, Facebook and Instagram. That's kind of, been the best for us. We've tried some other ones. They haven't quite kind of gotten as consistent return or traction. We've tried also, there's a company called, I think it's Vibe, that does basically, it's like streaming, call it commercials. It's a little more traditional commercials, but for streaming platforms.
Right.
And that I think is a good kind of, it's definitely a good idea. It's a good platform. They do a good job. Again, like for the smaller indie guys, I don't, the spend versus the return. I think the biggest thing with all this marketing stuff is it's very hard to get any kind of real-time data to see what's working. Reports are often like a month out, maybe more depending on where you're kind of getting it. And it's very hard to target exactly like, is that working, So we've kind of looked back at like the years and kind of looked at our spend and it's like, we're just trying to be like, okay, as long as we're making more than we're spending, So to answer your question, that those first couple of months for sure. But to be honest, it's kind of been pretty erratic. We've had some months where like we don't know why there was a spike. We've had one month, a month where there's nothing. So it's a little harder to navigate than some of the other, kind of data driven sites that YouTube, for example, as far as the analytics you're getting.
Yeah. And do you mind me asking, so how much would you spend a month on advertising on Meta, for example?
Yeah, so we kind of actually have some numbers I pulled just so I mean, honestly, like, so just from here I have like, let's see, I have like 2025, I have like April to September. And we spent anywhere from, $250 to, $50
Right. Okay.
per month. I some ones here is like 170 one, and it's hard, man, because it's like you're trying to get that correlation of like, oh, more spend, more return, right? And vice versa. And it's interesting, like there's months we spent $40 and did better than months that we spent 250.
Yeah.
So
yeah. How are you?
But yeah, we try to keep it somewhat small.
Right. And how are you targeting? How targeted are you? Are you like horror audience, men 18 to 44? What's your kind of? Do you profile them?
So we started like a little bit more targeted. Like when we first started, like we tried to gather some stuff, like and that's the other thing, is that platform and those algorithms change so frequently, and even Meta itself as an ad kind of service changes so quickly and frequently, so it's you're trying to keep up with all that. So I think we started first like more targeted, like you said, so like horror, psychological thriller, leaning a little bit towards men, a little bit younger, and then it kind of, as it progressed, things changed a little bit, and just from like trying to talk to people and look at stuff online, they said actually people are getting better results letting Meta do its thing with its own audience targeting, like that info that it kind of pulls is a little more probably sophisticated than what you're doing manually targeting. So I would say for half, maybe a little more than half of the last year, we've kind of leaned into letting kind of from the targeting standpoint, Meta kind of do its thing. And then we'll break them up into platform ad sets. So we'll target each platform so we could kind of see, at least platform wise, what's kind of getting a little bit of traction, and that kind of gives us a little bit more transparency on the numbers coming back.
And is that just you're going Amazon and Tubi? Are those your main targets, or?
Those are our main targets. I mean, we also did Apple, at launch. We did, Roku, and it's a lot of trial and error. So you're trying to, spread it out and kind of see what's coming back to you as far as return. But yeah, as it's gone on, it seems like, YouTube. I mean, sorry, not YouTube. Tubi and Amazon have been the biggest kind of earners for us.
Yeah. And I'm assuming it's Tubi's at the top, then Amazon, would you say?
It's at the moment, yes, but early on, Amazon was a close second, to be honest with you. And that's kind of, so when you go, when you switch back to the free or core plan, they kind of give you, your dashboard is like the past 6 months. There is a way to go into statements and see like the numbers, but they're more kind of like how they come in like almost a spreadsheet. So like by day. So it's a lot of smaller amounts that you're trying to like kind of add up. But so like let's just call it the last 6 months or so, it seems like Tubi is definitely a little bit more, but so early on it was very close, to be honest. And I'm not sure quite why that changed or dropped off,
Yeah, maybe were you selling the film on Amazon to start with? Because I imagine you get more from that, would you?
Yeah.
And is it now gone on to Prime, or?
It is, yeah. So we, we started rent or buy, the usual, Amazon, Apple, and then before we like kind of turned on, AVOD. But from what I remember, it wasn't like at that moment, like it dropped, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was a gradual, maybe when people realized it was, you know, free with ads or something, that's why it kind of dropped off or not. Again, it's like you're trying to make as much sense of the data as you can with what you have.
Yeah.
But I do remember it wasn't because we were, you know, thinking, okay, AVOD, it should, and for a decent amount after, it was still up there. So I'm not exactly sure why.
Yeah, it is pea soup, isn't it? Trying to look for all those. I mean, I bet you the only people who really know are either the people at Tubi or like Netflix. Obviously, they've got a pretty good handle on their stats, but everyone else is sort of in the dark or getting information through, like you say, trying to add up all those tiny little micro transactions to work out where it's all coming from. So that's really interesting. So looking back on Cheat as a film, what do you think's the biggest lesson you learned from that?
Well, I mean, from the distribution side or from
So give me the
film,
so give me the first of all, let's do the making of the film. So what did you learn from making the film? What's the biggest lesson?
The biggest lesson from making the film is, you know, I think especially now you could do a lot with a little. We shot the film in 12 days for $65,000. And, you know, I think that was a lesson that there is a way to kind of make these at a certain quality and cheap. And then the other thing is, you know, I think we were chasing kind of what we were kind of told was sellable or marketable at the time.
Yeah.
You know, we had made this little kind of, you know, horror Boys in the Woods kind of, you know, COVID thing I talked about. And it was like, I think we fell a little bit into, well, hey, this is doing really well now. And if you made something like this, then you can make money and have a career and then make what you want. And kind of, I think we got caught in that a little bit. So that was definitely a big lesson with like making it. And then as far as the distribution of it, I mean, I think the big lesson was, you know, just navigating the sales agents and the deals. And like so many people talk about, especially now, not chasing or thinking of this kind of, you know, golden ticket that's going to come and save, you know, like the old indie 90s, you know, payday at Sundance. Like, you know, everybody says it's a little cliche at this point, but those days are gone. So I think that's the biggest thing, and planning. So like for this film now, we haven't gotten in or figured out our festival premieres yet, but we're planning as if we're going to have to release this ourselves. So we're really from this point having a strategy of what that looks like, where we didn't really have that with Cheat. It was a little bit more of the traditional play some festivals, talk to as many people, distributors, sales agents as possible, try to navigate the best deal. Where now we're saying, okay, we'll listen. We want to hear all the deals if they're there, but we're having a plan to release it ourselves. And that includes timing, marketing, you know, where it's going, if it's Filmhub, if it's Bitmax, if it's, you know, so that's probably the biggest lesson. And then if something comes along, great. But if not, we have a very planned out, you know, kind of structure, which we didn't really have for Cheat, to be quite honest.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So there's a couple of things I wanted to. Oh, first I want to ask you, what was Cheat shot on? Because I will get asked. What camera did you use?
So we shot on Alexa Mini.
Yep.
And we got really old Lomo square front anamorphic lenses.
Nice.
So they're like 70s, like really old. I loved the way they looked. My DP probably hated me because the focus rings and they had all their autofocus and it was like so old. But I think it just gave it like, you know, somewhat of a nostalgic feel that we were kind of going for. You know, Kev and I were really trying to, you know, get that like 70s, 80s kind of feel from it.
Yeah. And so that was a rental, I'm assuming. You don't own one.
Yeah.
Can I borrow it if you do? The other thing I was going to say was about what you said about falling into the trap of making something that you think is going to sell. There's two sides to that, because part of me thinks if you did Cheat too, They'd probably kind of feed each other as far as people watching them. But what I was interested to know was, so you saying the next film you're making now, have you kind of, is it right, we're not making something for anyone else, making it for us, or are you towing the line a little bit? What's your strategy there?
Yeah, I mean, this one, to be quite honest, Kevin and I were like, fuck everybody. Let's make
Yep.
something. Let's make something that like we want to make, we want to see, we want to feel really good about. And we kind of went back to like, let's just make something fun, you know, like so this one is like a 1970s crime thriller. You know, it's kind of just like a fun, like adventure kind of movie. And, you know, it's genre for sure, but we kind of were like, let's just, you know, let's do something for us, and that we feel really good about. And like, you know, we're not trying to be something, we're not trying to like fit in a box. And you know, you hear both sides of it where it's like, well, you got to think about, you know, you got to think about the audience, and you got to think about marketing before you even write the script, before you even shoot anything. And it just seems so antithetical to art, you know. And that's why I kind of love, like, Rick Rubin is like the audience is last. I'm sure you've heard that. It's like very famous kind of, you know, interview kind of going around. But the point is like, you have to make it with like as pure of intentions as possible and make the best thing. And then sure, then you could figure out how to market it and sell it. And that's what we tried to do with this one. We were just like, let's go back to the movies we love. Let's go back to something fun, you know, and we'll see how it does. But yeah, there is that temptation where it's like, oh, this works, do that.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, you do see a lot of that, and I've done that myself, where I've kind of lent towards that. I've lent the other way, where I've gone for something that I just completely love, but that is really hard to sell.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know where I'll end up next, but it is a bit of a art commerce struggle that does keep me up at night.
It's so hard, man. It really, because it's like also like everything you know, that I've learned from, you know, studying and studying the craft and like all of that. It just seems it's the complete opposite of what's being fed to us now, you know, where it was about the work. It was about do good work, make, you know, craftsmen making something, you know, and now it's forget that, you know, check all these boxes. So that it's really hard. It's really hard to, you know, but I think the hope is that by doing it on a lower budget, you know, that you're, you know, hopefully kind of like minimizing your risk a little bit and still hopefully creatively, you know, fulfilled, and then the audience will, you know, hopefully see that, appreciate that in some way.